Buongiorno a tutti. Oggi parliamo con un ospite molto interessante collegato dagli Stati Uniti, si chiama Bigtree ed è un produttore cinematografico. Ve lo presento subito. Hello Del, how are you?
I am great, Massimo. Thanks for having me on.
I'm going to explain in Italian very quickly who you are and then we'll get to English, the two of us. Dunque lui è un produttore di documentari e anche viene dal cinema, ha lavorato molto nel cinema ed è diventato conosciuto in Italia perché ha prodotto il film Vaxxed, quello di 10 anni fa, sui danni da vaccino. È un film molto famoso del quale voglio parlare subito con lui. Facciamo questa intervista perché lui verrà in Italia tra 20 giorni, verso il 20 di maggio, e verrà a presentare il suo nuovo documentario che si chiama An Inconvenient Study, che in italiano si può tradurre con una ricerca scomoda. Study è la ricerca scientifica. An Inconvenient Study è l'argomento di cui poi lui ci parlerà dopo. Le proiezioni saranno a Milano il 21 di maggio, a Padova il 22 e il 24 a Roma. Per avere informazioni e dettagli sugli indirizzi e tutto potete scrivere a info@zerospike.org. Questa è l'email dalla quale potete avere tutte le informazioni. So Del, how are you?
I'm very
You're
good.
in the States now?
Yes, Austin, Texas.
Okay. Before we get into this actual documentary, I'd like to rewind the tape a little bit and start back from, what was it, 2016, I think. We actually came to know you and we heard about Vaxxed for the first time when the film was actually scrapped from the program in the Tribeca Film Festival of Robert De Niro. That was an actual shocker for everybody because, we know, especially me, I lived in New York for a few years. I know that De Niro and Tribeca is like his fortress. I mean, for him to have to scrap a film that's already been programmed, the pressures on him must have been really, really, really incredible. Take us through those days just very briefly to see how it all started.
Well, it was really amazing. Tribeca, right at that moment, when they announced our film Vaxxed was going to be in the festival, immediately headlines attacking Tribeca. How could you have this film? Calling us baby killers. This is going to get children killed. And in the middle of that tumultuous moment, actually Robert De Niro came out publicly and said, I am going to screen this film anyway. And he told the world something we did not know. He said, I have a son with autism, and my wife and I believe that vaccines contributed to his autism. And that was why he was supporting the film. So then 48 hours later, 2 days later, then the film was still scrapped. So it wasn't, this was his festival. He co-founded it with Jane Rosenthal. But he had even come out on our behalf and stood with us. And the pressure was so great that he then had to withdraw the film. So you're right. When we were arguing with Jane Rosenthal, who was telling us that the film was being pulled, we said, why? And they said, because there's scientists that say that some of the science is wrong in your film. And we were saying, what part of our film? Let us show you we'll show you our evidence. And they said, we're not going to allow you to do that. So they wouldn't even allow us, they wouldn't even tell us what issues they had. And then we said, who is pressuring? And after a 1-hour phone call, finally at the end of the call, Jane Rosenthal admitted it's the Sloan Foundation, who's been one of our primary sponsors for Tribeca from the very beginning. Sloan Foundation is the nonprofit side of Sloan Kettering, a very big medical institution. And so, it was the pharmaceutical industry behind getting the film kicked out. But I will say this is the best thing that ever happened, really, because it gave us so much of the, free press, all negative, but across the world, we got press in every major, media magazine, film magazine there was. And so the film was sold out when we started screening just a week later. That film was sold out at every theater we went to, every single day, 5 shows a day for an entire year as we toured with the film all over America. We went to, I mean, it was even screened in Ireland and Australia. And I would imagine even Italy, though we were not there.
Oh, we knew about you because of the Scrapping at Tribeca.
Yeah.
We would have not known, probably would have much later and at a much lesser level had it not been for that cancellation. Obviously, when they do that, they have this kind of knee-jerk reaction where they think that canceling is the best solution is actually not the best solution.
No.
Also, the fact that, I mean, the film, I've seen it many years ago, but I remember quite well. It's actually, I would call it the ultimate road movie on, unfortunately, not so pleasant events, which are people who have received damage from vaccines. But there's no scientific statements of any kind that you're making in that film that could call for a cancellation on scientific basis. There wasn't. It was just testimonies, which is probably
no. I mean, Vaxxed, the original Vaxxed, did have a whistleblower inside the CDC named Dr. William Thompson, and he was coming forward and saying that they had committed scientific fraud on the MMR study, measles, mumps, rubella, inside the CDC, and that they did see a correlation between the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, and autism. And so, you know, he was making a statement that science likes to say is not true, even though they are actually the ones that have no scientific evidence of their claims.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What is the Simpson-Wood memo, and why is it so important in the whole scenario of the battle on vaccines?
Well, so Simpson-Wood is a different conversation from what Vaxxed covered. Vaxxed covered the MMR vaccine. Simpson-Wood was all about a symposium over, I believe, a weekend, a couple of days, discussing the dangers of mercury in vaccines. And, you know, I wasn't at that symposium, but Lynn Redwood, someone that's a very big voice in America in the vaccine risk awareness movement, she had a child that had autism from a vaccine. She very much believes it was the mercury. She was there. And apparently, you know, as they presented data early on, different scientists were bringing in, they were showing an associated risk between the mercury toxicity and autism. But as the weekend went along, they started whitewashing all of that. And by the end, they came out with a document that said the opposite of what has been covered, saying there was no effect. So essentially, they erased the data, cherry-picked the science that they wanted to point to, and then said mercury did not have any effect on autism. Now, ironically, shortly after they started taking the mercury out of vaccines, they said just as a precaution, but it was mostly removed from vaccines, except for multi-dose vaccines where they stick the needle in more than once and give it to several different people. There's single dose where the little vial is just for one person. And when there was multi-dose vials, sometimes those would have mercury. And Robert Kennedy Jr., our HHS secretary here in America, finally removed all mercury from vaccines permanently as of this year.
While we're on the topic, I wanted to ask you a few things about Robert Kennedy Jr. He's the one, by the way, I first heard mentioning this, what you described, the manipulation you described. He called it massaging the data, which I think is an incredible expression, good, very, very effective expression. Massaging the data can change, the outcome from positive to negative, step by step, once by once, changing the cohort and all that. And it's very interesting what he says about Robert Kennedy Jr. We have he has a big following here, of course, because of his past as an activist. There's one great question that we all kind of have here. Maybe you can help us answer it. Donald Trump is not much loved here, at least not anymore, of course, for all this foreign policy decisions that he makes or that he doesn't make.
Yeah.
But one thing that everybody gives him credit for is having chosen Robert Kennedy and sticking with him. Why do you think that happened? Or do you know anything about how that happened, and how could it become that he actually became health secretary?
Well, I know a lot about it. I was director of communications for Robert Kennedy Jr. when he ran for president. So I was in virtually every room and every meeting where we were discussing whether he would join Donald Trump or not. I was there the moment Robert Kennedy Jr. began to consider it. It happened the very same day there was an assassination attempt on President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. Bobby reached out just to give his condolences. Obviously, assassination is a very sensitive issue for Robert Kennedy Jr., who lost both his father to assassination and his uncle. So because of that, he really wanted to reach out and just express that he felt like the conflicts in America in politics had gone too far. And in that first phone call, after talking about the assassination, Donald Trump really sort of pleaded with Bobby and said, "Look, Bobby, you've run an amazing campaign as an independent politician, which is really impossible. It's almost impossible to win in that we have a two-party system. You're either Democrat or Republican." Bobby was running in the middle as an independent, but Trump said, "You've done a very good job and it's commendable, but I do not believe you can win." And I actually think we agree on many of the topics you care the most about. I do believe our kids are very, very sick, and I know you know what to do to make them healthier. He said, "I do have a concern with vaccines myself." And this wasn't the first time they talked about it. Donald Trump actually had a meeting with Robert Kennedy Jr. during his first administration, all the way back in 2017,
Yeah, I remember that.
where he had brought Robert Kennedy Jr. in to potentially run a vaccine safety commission. Yeah. That was undermined. In fact, there's a Substack that was just written by a woman that came out 2 days ago saying, "I was the one that shut that safety commission down." So very interesting. So they've had this distant relationship on this issue of vaccines. And in this phone call, Donald Trump said, "Why don't we join forces? I know we don't agree on everything, but why don't you run the things that we do agree on?" And so it took about a month. There's a lot of thinking about it. Bobby really had to think how it was going to affect his family. They would obviously be upset, but in the end, he gave a powerful speech. I believe it was August 23rd, where he suspended his campaign as an independent and decided to join Donald Trump. And he said, "The first time we ever heard it, that Donald Trump has given me the opportunity to make America healthy again, Maha." And in that moment, the Maha movement in America was launched. And he also made a profound statement: "We have to love our children more than we hate each other," which I think was really very profound. And, they continue to be aligned on this issue. Donald Trump talks a lot about witnessing with his own eyes a young child running around his office of someone he knew. And then they went and got their vaccines, and later they couldn't speak, diagnosed with autism. And from that moment on, he says, he's always believed something needed to be done on this issue. So, they share that commonality, and he has stood by Robert Kennedy Jr. It's been a little bit difficult. I think Donald Trump still is has affection for the COVID vaccine, which I think a lot of people would like to see Bobby get rid of. But I think that's off limits. I think that Donald Trump still believes in that vaccine, but is having Bobby look at the other issues that are causing health problems in America. This is the sickest generation of kids we've ever seen in America. And really, we have the sickest nation of children in the industrialized world. Italy, your children are much healthier than ours are. That's not saying they're perfectly healthy. I think you're having many of the same autoimmune and neurodevelopmental disorders that we are, but ours are higher rates.
I have another question about about Robert Kennedy, he's getting a lot of pushback in the mainstream media. I mean, all I can see is people like Sanjay Gupta or other, pundits that basically attack him or just continue giving the message that he's really like a fraud, that he shouldn't be where he is and all that. I understand where this comes from, of course. How is he taking it, and is he going to make it anyway?
Bobby's really well designed for criticism. Really doesn't bother him. He knows what he believes, and he stands in what he believes. I once asked him while we were touring in the presidential campaign, why didn't you just walk away from vaccines? That, you're a darling of the Democratic Party. He's the most successful environmentalist maybe of all times in America, especially when you look at the work he's done as an attorney for environmental issues, cleaning up the water and the air and pollution and things like that Democrats really care about. But as soon as he decided to get into this vaccine issue, they all turned on him. And I said, what keeps you from just going back to who you were and letting go of this one issue? And he said, my father, Robert Kennedy Sr., used to take us on family trips. And when we would, when he'd be speaking somewhere, and he said he would always drive into the poor neighborhoods and point to all of us kids in the car and say, see all these people? These are Kennedy people. This is who we work for. We don't work for the people that can afford lobbyists and industries that buy politicians. We work for the people. And Bobby said to me, from that day on, I've always believed that. And the truth is I know vaccines are killing and maiming some children. And I cannot, now that I know that harm is taking place, he spent years avoiding it, trying not to believe it, parents asking him to look into it. But once he finally looked into it, he says, once I know the truth, my conscience does not allow me to walk away. And so that's what keeps him in it. He feels that he has a spiritual life, that God is, given him this purpose for a reason, and it's in God's hands. Whether he succeeds or doesn't, he refers to I think it's the Greek story of Sisyphus, pushing the stone up the hill. He's said this many times. I just get up every morning and I'm going to push that stone up the hill. I don't get to decide where the top of the hill is or how much work there is. I just do what is asked of me. He is one of the most beautiful people I've ever met. As you know, our television, our media is mostly funded by the pharmaceutical industry. More than half of all advertising in news and television is the pharmaceutical industry. So those news anchors do not work for the people. They're not there to tell us the truth. They're really advertising agents in many ways for the pharmaceutical industry. And it's why you never really get good stories about how drugs hurt us or vaccines are hurting us. But let me really simplify, because I think there's people watching right now that don't understand what Bobby's doing or what I do. There is not a single, this is very simple to understand, there is not a pharmaceutical product in the world that doesn't have side effects for some people, okay? So Bobby and I, we're not saying vaccines are hurting everybody or are bad for everybody. What we're saying is there is a group of children that are being killed and injured by vaccines every year, just like they're killed and injured by chemotherapy or have an allergic reaction to penicillin before someone realizes it. If you catch it in time, they don't die. But every day, Tylenol, children die of a reaction to Tylenol. It's one of the leading causes of death in America. Pharmaceutical products kill and injure. That's just the nature of them. It's not everybody. You can't say everybody's going to have that reaction to Tylenol. But the problem with vaccines, especially in America, I don't know what your politics is in Italy, we force children to take these products in America. They're not allowed in social settings. They're not allowed to go to school if they don't get all these vaccines, which means that puts even more pressure upon the need for these to be safe for everybody. Otherwise, our government, through these mandates, this forcing of this product, is murdering innocent children. Children that could have gone on to be the next president of the United States will not, because they were vaccinated and had a bad reaction. Similarly, maybe the next great scientist that could figure out how to make vaccines safe for everybody is going to be killed by a vaccine when they were a kid. We aren't supposed to be allowed to murder innocent individuals for the greater good. That's what the excuse they use is, well, it's better on the whole for everybody else. Therefore, we just accept this casualty. And what we're saying is we don't accept that. I don't accept that. Bobby Kennedy doesn't accept that. Every child in America and every child in the world has a right to life. And they need to be informed that this product, even if it's safe for many, isn't safe for everybody. We want doctors to be trained when a child is having one of these reactions to know how to stop it, but they're not. They're actually being brainwashed and told no injuries happen at all. There's never, this isn't true. Bobby's crazy. What is crazy is anyone saying that, because there's a warning label that is wrapped around every vaccine that's sent to the doctor's office. And in it, it has brain swelling, which is encephalitis and can lead to death. It has anaphylaxis, which is, we all know, an allergic reaction can lead to death. It can cause Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is paralysis, transverse myelitis, which is paralysis, Bell's palsy, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, where all your skin is falling off. This is all written in the warning label, and yet everyone in the world is being told there are no side effects. That is in direct contrast to the fact that there's warnings saying they do have these side effects. And so what Robert Kennedy Jr. and I are involved in, he's a much higher level now, is trying to get the world to recognize and admit that some people are having very serious reactions to these, and we should be doing science to figure out what is causing those reactions. Is there a way to test them ahead of time to figure out what are the susceptibilities that maybe make them vulnerable? Is there a combination of vaccines, just like combinations of food or combinations of drugs, that are somehow causing this bad reaction in kids? All we want is do an investigation to do more science so we can figure out how to make vaccines safe for every single child, not just the ones that are having a good reaction. And the pharmaceutical industry is blocking that. Sanjay Gupta is lying about it. I think because the motivation is they are worried that if we start thinking about the side effects, which do exist, they're written right on the vaccine labels, as I've said themselves, that you never see. But if we start thinking there could be a risk, some of us might stop vaccinating because of that, and they will lose this, vaccination of everybody. This is the only product where they say it only works if everyone takes it. That creates this motivation to cover up everyone that's having a bad reaction. And so we're living in a false narrative, which is vaccines are perfectly safe. They are no safer than every other drug. And I think, given the fact that they have live viruses, they have live bacteria sometimes, they have polysorbate 80, which crosses the blood-brain barrier, they have heavy metals and aluminum, they have aborted fetal DNA from dead babies, foreign proteins, and also animal proteins from monkeys and hamsters and worms. The odds are, if we're to look at it, the ingredients in vaccines lend themselves to be much more dangerous, actually, than most drugs. But what we hear is they have no way of injuring anybody in any way, as though they're made of water. And that is misinformation. And that is really actually the crazy thing we've all accepted. It's just simply not true. And Bobby is now telling people the truth.
Wow. Okay, let's get now to the point. What is an inconvenient study and why is it so inconvenient?
Yeah. So if what I'm saying, I think it's reasonable. I think anyone listening to what I just said would say that is reasonable. I have to assume there are some injuries, right, from vaccines. I will say it even simpler. There's not even a food we know of on earth that everyone can eat and someone won't have a reaction. Someone has a gluten intolerance to spaghetti, or, a dairy reaction, or peanut oil could kill people, right? So, nothing is perfectly safe for everybody. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, since now, if you agree with what I've just said, we've changed the conversation. The conversation is not if we are killing and injuring some people. We know we are. That's just the nature of any product like a vaccine. The next question becomes, how many? What percentage are having a bad reaction? And the only way we could ever really get to that information, because one of the things, the work that I've done with my nonprofit, which is I have sued government agencies, taken them to court to get them to admit things like they haven't done proper safety studies. So here's what we know for sure right now. Not one of in America, we have about 16 or 17 different diseases we vaccinate for. Not one of the vaccines of those 17 diseases was ever tested in a double-blind saline placebo trial. That's a safety test where one group gets the product and the other group gets something totally safe like saline, salt water injected. And we follow both groups to see, is there any side effects? Is there more, ADD, ADHD in one of the groups? Is there more cancer? Is there more autism? That study was never, ever done. We have put these products on the market with no safety testing. That is, I know that sounds crazy, that's the truth. So the only way now we can figure out how many people are having a bad reaction is we would have to compare vaccinated children and their health outcomes to totally unvaccinated children over some period of time. This study has been done about a dozen times, but I officially, I wanted to see this study done by people that say they believe in vaccines. There's been several scientists that are already skeptical that have done these studies, and they get undermined by people saying, well, they were anti-vaxxers. They were just trying to get what they were looking for. So I challenged the head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Health in Detroit, Michigan, in America. Henry Ford is one of our biggest research science institutes, hospital systems. We did, for instance, the Moderna vaccine. One of the major arms of the trials happened at Henry Ford Health. And the head of that trial, very pro-vaccine, and put out the Moderna vaccine because of his trials, was Dr. Marcus Zervos, the head of infectious disease. So I had dinner with him back in 2016.
Wait. Let me just, so we don't spoil this. I'd like to save it as, avoid the spoiler. Okay. What happened? No, because it's interesting. I mean, I want people to come and see your documentary when you come over to Italy. You will find out, I'm going to say this in Italian first because it's for Italian people in a way. Quando vedrete questo documentario, scoprirete che cosa è successo a questo dottor Zerbos, il quale si era reso disponibile con Del Bigtree per fare questa ricerca, ma una volta che ha visto i risultati ha piantato le unghie e ha deciso di non pubblicarla più. Del Bigtree si è messo una specie di un microfono nascosto, la telecamera nascosta, è andato con lui a parlare al ristorante e noi possiamo vedere dal vivo la conversazione nella quale questo dottore spiega a Del perché lui non ha il coraggio di pubblicare questa ricerca. Questo è il cuore del documentario. This is the heart of the documentary, and I would like people to come and see it.
Yeah. Why it's important? The best science you can do, which when we think of it's called the scientific method. The scientific method invites anyone that has an issue with, for instance, a new product or a hypothesis. is supposed to, if you think you're wrong, you're supposed to move to the top of the list to challenge it. And whoever made that product, whoever has come up with that hypothesis or theory, invites the challenge and then defends it. So the best science you could do is to get your opposition, the ones that think you're wrong, have them do the science. And that's what makes Henry Ford's study and Dr. Zervos so important, is that it was being done to prove me wrong. And in fact, still proved me and Robert Kennedy Jr. right. That's the best science there is. And that's why I think that makes this study and ultimately this movie one of the most important things in science in the world today. Now, I want to be clear. Henry Ford did not publish this study. They refused to publish it, the scientist. So I want to say that because I can be sued if I misrepresent that. But you should ask yourself, if a pro-vaccine scientist and a pro-vaccine institution did a study they do all the time, what was it in that study that made them afraid to publish it? That's why you want to watch this movie, and I think, and take a look at this study. It is, I will just say this, the most damning study about our vaccine program that has ever been done.
Well, we can only look forward for you to visiting here. I wish a lot of people will come to see in Rome and Milano and Padova, and if there's any new, I'm going to say this in Italian because it's not for you anyway. Lo aspettiamo che venga, e se ci saranno altre date aggiuntive oltre a quelle che abbiamo già detto, 21, 22, 24 Milano, Padova e Roma, sarete informati sempre sul sito di info@zerospike.org, zero spike con la K alla fine. Del, thank you very much. Sorry for the connection has been a little bit unsteady. It's probably our fault here. I don't live in an area in Italy where the connections are too good usually, and I have to live with this. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you here and to talk to you soon again in the future.
Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you in Italy in just a couple of weeks here, so it'll be fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.